videos we discussed about primitive variables and then reference variables. When we discussed about reference variables, what we have done is we have created custom objects like dog and book, and we have observed how these objects are referenced. Now we will talk about arrays in this video. So arrays comes under reference variables. It doesn't come under primitive variables. We will discuss why it is so. Okay. Now let's see. As you all know, an array is nothing but a collection which stores few objects. Like when we observed int num, like let's say, when you talk about a primitive variable, what we see int num equal to, let's say 10. It stores only one value. And when we see dog object, when we see dog equal to new dog, what it is storing? It stores only a single dog. But when we talk about array, it stores multiple numbers and it stores multiple dogs. Okay, but all those are of similar type. So let's discuss it in detail. Now if you see, what I have done here is I have declared an array whose type is of integer. So if you see here, ideally what we do for integer, to declare an integer variable, we will do like this, int num. So what is the difference between the first line and the 7th line and the 8th line? You just have these braces, right? So whenever you add these braces, it means that this is an array. When you don't have any brace, then it doesn't mean it holds only a single value. But when we add these braces, it holds multiple values of this type. Okay. So when you say it holds multiple values, it will not hold double, float, mixed values. It will hold multiple values of only integer type, not of different types. When I say dog of pets, okay, it holds, this pets variable holds multiple dog objects. It will not hold any song object or any cat object. It will hold multiple dog objects. And you might get one doubt. So when I say that integer of number, since integer is a primitive variable, why can't integer array is also a primitive variable, right? You might get that doubt. So you might we can understand that if you say dog of, since dog is already a reference variable, array of dogs can also be a reference variable. But here, why the integer array is a reference variable? Let's see. So what happens actually is, so whenever you declare int of nums, what it does is it will create it will create a holder like this. It will create a holder which will have reference to the array. So if you see here, there are 3 steps here, as I said. So first one is the declaration, and the second one is the creation of the actual values, and then the third step is assigning the values to the variables, right? So what happens is, when you declare int of nums, what actually happens behind the scene is, it will create a nums variable, okay, which is of type integer array, and then it will hold a reference. It will hold a remote control, okay. So this is what happens when when the first statement gets executed, and when the second statement gets executed, new int of 7. What happens is, on the heap, there are 7 integer variables that gets created. So this is a garbage collectible heap, and on the heap you have 7 holders. Like here they are saying whatever is the 7 here, right? It holds 7 integer objects. So it will create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It will create 7 variables or 7 objects for integer. So first one will store the integer value, second one will store the integer value, third one will store the integer, fourth, fifth, sixth. But the index starts from 0, that's why you have 0 to 6. But the size of the array, if you look at it, it holds 7 objects, but since the array starts from 0, you have the end index ending with the 6. Okay. Now inside this, what happens is, let's say, like how to assign values to this. If you see the single num variable, what you do, int num equal to, you do 10. So when you do this num equal to 10, you can see the first one, right? What happens is when you say int num equal to 10, you will have one glass kind of thing or a holder whose kind is of int and whose range, whose size depends on the range of the integer, and then inside that you will have the value. Like here I have declared 10, right? So 10 will get converted to the binary bits and then that value is stored here. So, but in integer, how do you store the values? Now, what we have done is we have created created a reference variable for array, and then you have created memory for 7 integer variables. How to assign values? Like how to assign values, how to push values to these variables. So we can do that using these indexes. So as I said, the indexes starts from 0, right? Nems of 0. When you say nems of 0 or this nems of 0, at first position you can assign the value. When you say nems of 1, for the second position you can assign the value. And nems of 2 you can assign the value. So like this, whenever you do this actual assignment, then what happens is here 6 gets converted to the binary bits, and then maybe you will have something like this 0 0 0 1 1, something like this. So when you actually do this step, the values goes here, the values goes inside the holders here. So to recap, what we have done is first we have declared our integer variable. When we declare this, what happens is you will have one variable created having reference, which holds the reference variable like a remote control. And then when you do this new integer of 7 on the heap, what happens is a memory gets allocated. So how the memory gets allocated is, as you know, integer might as we have discussed, integer will take how many bits? Here integer will take 32 bits, right? So since we have 7 integer variables, 7 into 32, whatever is the value of 32 into 7, those many bits gets allocated on the memory. Okay, and first 32 bits gets allocated for the first object, and the 33rd bit to the next 32 bits will be allocated to the second object. Okay, so by the end of this step, what we have done is only the memory gets allocated, and for each object you have a memory address, but there is no value actually inside these cups. And when you do this step, that is when the actual values gets allocated. Like nems of 0, here you will have value. Okay, now how to access, like how to, like let's say I want to get the value that is present in the third object. How you can do is, it's the same how we have done for the dog object. Whatever is the variable, you can take this nems variable, right? And what you want third object. Nems of 3 will give you the value. Okay, let's say int value equal to nems of 3. It will not throw any error, because when you the way you can access the objects is via index. Okay, this is how you can create an array using the primitive values, because inside an array you have a primitive value. Let's see how you can create an array for the dog objects. So when you do this dog of pets, as I said, whenever you do this first statement, when you execute the first statement, what happens is you can get a one reference variable here. Okay, so as I have said, there is a reference variable, and that variable has to be linked to the dog array. Okay, and when you do this new dog of 7, what happens is on the heap memory 7, like you will have the memory allocated for the 7 objects, because there are 7 dog objects, and for each object memory has to be allocated. So if you saw the previous video, whenever you create new dog of, memory gets allocated, right? Same way memory gets allocated for these 7 objects. Okay, but these 7 objects, what it holds is, it will also hold the reference for the dog object. So let's see what happens is, by the end of this statement, you will just have till here, like till here you will have it. You will how the reference variable got created here. You just create a variable, and inside that it will hold some bits or remote control to access the dog array. So when you does this new dog of 7, you will have 7 more variables on the heap, which each one will have some bits or the remote control to access the dog object. So this variable is to access the array, and inside this variable is to access the object. Okay. Now what you do is, let's say you assign dog objects to these variables. So what you have to do, pets of 0 equal to new dog of, and pets of 1 equal to new dog of. So when you do new dog of, a dog object actually gets created on the heap, right? And new dog of, when you do this, a dog object gets created, and when you do this equal assignment, this pets of 0 is linked to this dog object. So this reference variable is pointing to this dog object. And when you do this pets of 2, what happens is the third object, 0 is the first object, 1 is the second object, 2 is the third object. So third reference variable is linked to this object. Okay. So here the third reference variable is linked to this dog object. So, and how can you access the values? Like here what we have done is we have just used nems of 3. But here, since it holds a reference variable, what you have to do is my dogs of 0 dot bark of. So here if you see what we have done, there is an array of dogs with 3 dog objects, and to access the dog object or to make the dog object bark, what you have to do, if you don't have, if it is not an array, what you used to do directly, you used to take the reference variable dot bark of. But here one more addition is you have to specify the index also, dot 0 of bark of. If you want the second object to bark, what you have to do, my dogs of 1 dot bark of. Okay. So this is what you have to do. So let's see the difference, how the integer of integer array and the dog array, what are the differences between those. So if you look at here, the constant thing is it will hold a reference, it will hold a reference variable to access the array. Here also the same thing, it will hold a reference variable to access the array. And inside that you will have multiple holders to access the objects or to put the objects, 7 integer variables. Here also you have 7 variables, dog variables. Here it's not an integer variable. Here it's a dog variable. But the difference here is whenever you assign values to these variables, directly those will be put into these variables. But here what happens is the object gets created separately, and these values will just have the reference. So it's the same thing, like for one integer, what you have done for one integer, if you look at here, this can be compared with a single integer. Int num equal to 10, when you do, you will create a variable and then value gets assigned. Okay, but since this is an array, like this, there will be multiple variables, you will have multiple variables because this is a collection. And the additional step is all this has to be put it in the array, right? That's why you create an additional variable to access this array. The same thing happens here. When you create a single dog variable or object, you create an object, and then what you have done is there will be reference variable which will access this dog object. Since this is a collection, what you have done is, whatever we have done it here, you create multiple things like this based on the array size. Okay. So you create multiple reference variables which are of dog type. And since all this has to be put in a single array, or there should be a way to access all these, what we have done, you create another reference variable which can access this array. So that is the only thing we have done. So to summarize, an array always holds the reference variables. Okay. An array is always a reference variable irrespective of what it holds. Now if you see, and this is integer is a reference variable and dog array is a reference variable. But inside the reference variable, here what happens here is it holds the primitive values. This integer array holds the primitive values, but whereas the dog array holds the reference variables. That is the only difference. Irrespective of what it holds, an array is always a reference variable. Okay. And how you access or how you assign values, you just assign values by taking the index, like nems of 0 equal to 6, And then if you see the dog object as well, petswap0 equal to new dog of. And how you get the values from the array? What you have to do is you have to use this variable name, like you have to use this index dot barkov or anything. Like however, like how you have worked with individual integer variable or the dog variable, you can use the same thing, but the only addition, but the only step that you have to follow in addition is you have to specify the index. That is the only difference here. Hope you understood about the array variables. So we have completed discussing about the primitive variables and the reference variables, and also we spoke about integer array variables as well. Array variables also comes under the reference variables. Thank you.